Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are now starting the afternoon session P5. The title is Expansion of Global Business and Integration of HR. May I introduce the chair of this session, Professor Ju, School of Business, Yonsei University. And would you fill out the survey on your program book and submit to after the session in front of the door? Thank you very much.
안녕하십니까. 이렇게 만나 뵙게 돼서 반갑습니다. 오늘 이 세션은 상당히 중요한 의미가 있는 세션이라고 생각합니다. 우리나라 기업들 가운데 많은 기업들이 이미 지금 해외에 나가서 사업을 하고 있고, 또 상당한 기업들은 우리가 소위 자랑할 만한 그러한 글로벌 기업으로 성장한 기업들이 있습니다. 그래서 저희들이 이제 일반적으로 말하는 것은 글로벌 HR이 중요하다. 즉 세계 여러 곳에서 우리가 가장 적합한 인재를 뽑아서 우리의 경쟁의 포스트에 넣음으로써 우리 경쟁력을 향상시킬 수 있다. 그것에 대해서는 모든 분들이 다 합의할 거고, 또 어떤 테이블에서 얘기하면 다 동의할 겁니다. 그런데 막상 실질적으로 그러면 어떻게 세계적인 인재들을 우리가 관리하고 그분들을 리크루트하고 또 그분들이 조직을 위해서 일하게 할 수 있겠는가? 거기에 대해서는 상당한 문제가 있습니다. 왜냐하면 우리가 그만큼 경험이 부족하기 때문에 아무래도 세계적으로 인재들을 관리하고 그분들에게 제대로 역량을 발휘하게 하려고 그러면 그만한 어떤 노하우가 우리가 필요한데 그것을 우리가 좀 부족하다고 느끼지 않는가 이렇게 생각됩니다. 또한 해외에 진출되어 있는 중소기업들도 그 해외에서의 문화를 제대로 이해 못했다든가 이런 일로 말미암아 여러 가지 예상하지 않았던 문제들이 일어난 경우도 있다고 생각됩니다. 그래서 오늘은 참 귀한 자리를 마련했습니다. 그래서 오늘은 발표하시는 분이 오늘 아주 참 분위기가 필요한데요. 좋은데요. 그거는 뭐냐면 발표하시는 분이 한 분입니다. 그렇게 하고 토론하시는 분이 두 분이기 때문에 제가 아까 조금 식사하면서 어떻게 할까 생각을 같이 의논했었는데, 만약에 참가자분들이 많으시면 일단 발표를 시간을 많이 줄이겠다. 그래서 토론도 시간을 제한하고, 그래서 여기 현재 참석하신 분들의 많은 질문을 우리가 받고 거기에 대해서 우리가 실질적인 필요로 하는 그러한 토론의 시간을 갖는 것을 이렇게 저희가 계획을 했었습니다. 그래서 오늘 발표는 웨인 피트 부사장님이신데요. 제가 지금 아까 점심시간에 이렇게 만나 뵙고 말씀드려 보니까 뉴질랜드 분이신데 지금 싱가포르에 만 8년이 있으시고 해외에서 영업 활동에 대해서 상당히 좋아하시고 또 성공적으로 지금 해외 영업을 해외 싱가포르 지점에서 성공적으로 경영을 하시고 있으신 분입니다. 그래서 웨인 피트 분께서 먼저 프레젠테이션 한 30분 해주시게 되겠고요. 그 다음에는 이제 브렌다 머피 분께서 실질적인 경험을 갖다가 지금 맷 라이프에 계신데요. 바로 리저널 HR 비즈니스 리더로 있습니다. 그래서 이 실질적인 경험을 말씀해 주시게 될 것이고요. 그 다음에 최정수 대표님께서 실질적으로 많은 우리나라의 글로벌 기업이라든가 해외 진출 기업을 위해서 헤드헌터도 해주시고 여러 가지 컨설팅을 많이 해주신 경험이 있으신 분입니다. 또 이분께서 토론을 해주시게 되겠습니다. 그래서 한 분이 발표해 주시고 두 분이 토론하고 그 다음에 플로어에서 질문을 좀 많이 받는 것으로 해서 발표는 일단 웨인 피트 씨께서 30분 발표를 해주시고요. 그 다음에 브렌다 머피 씨께서 15분 토론해 주시고, 그 다음에 최정수 대표이사께서 15분 이렇게 토론해 주시고, 그 다음에 플로어에서 질의응답을 받는 순서를 갖도록 하겠습니다. 그러면 먼저 웨인 피트 씨께서 발표해 주시겠습니다. 큰 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
Very good afternoon to you all. Let me try that one more time. A very good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. One of the greatest challenges that we are going to face between now and around 3 o'clock is my challenge to keep you awake after a lovely lunch. So we have much information to share. One of the discussions that our team had over lunch was the amount of information that you have now received over the last day and a half, and how much repetition, how much repeat information you might have been getting. All right, so we're going to work pretty hard to try and keep this fresh and keep it interactive and keep it exciting for you. For my session, I'm only going to try and do 3 things. The first thing that I'd like to do is share with you some of the research that IBM has been doing around talent and around leadership and around a globally integrated enterprise. So share with you some of the results of that research. The second thing I'd like to do is to give you some examples of where my team works with clients like you and helps them on the journey towards becoming a globally integrated enterprise. And then I'd also like to share with you some examples of what IBM does. As our esteemed chair mentioned, I was prepared to speak to you for an hour. I have 75 slides ready to go. And so I will go through each one now very, very quickly. Small joke. So 3 things to start us off. If I can get the technology to work, I think we've got a great time in front of us. And if you thought about the events of the last 2 months, the momentous events of last night, and the common theme that seems to be running through all of that is a theme of change. I know many of you have been in your careers for a long time. For me, I have been working in this field for around 20 years. And for 20 years, it's felt like sometimes you're kicking a ball up a hill. And every time you kick the ball, it rolls back down to you. And many organizations have been struggling with the whole role of what do we call strategic HR? How does HR make a difference, add value to an organization, particularly in these rapidly changing times? And I guess the events of the last couple of months have really brought it home to me. I think we've got a crisis, but I think we've got a talent crisis on our hands. And one of the discussions that we had over lunch was this whole area of risk and risk management. And too often, I think, we're spending time in our financial terms of managing risk, of managing credit, of managing finance in our organizations. And I think the time has come where risk management needs to be applied to our human capital as well. So if we were ever looking for a crisis, if we were ever looking for the opportunity to embark on a new course, to take a new journey, to start that transformation from an HR perspective, but from an organizational perspective, I couldn't think of a better time than right now. So, one of the things that we've been doing in IBM, and we try to do this pretty frequently, is to take the pulse of what's happening in organizations, to make sure that the teams of people that we have are developing the solutions that our clients need to best meet their organizational goals. We do two things. We do a CEO study every 2 years, which really looks at the hearts, gets into the hearts and minds of where CEOs globally see their companies going, see the economy going, and what the drivers are that they're going to be focusing on. And we've just recently published the 2008 study, and I'll go through some very high-level highlights for you in a moment. The second thing we do is then to also poll and work with our Chief Human Resource Officer community and ask questions more around if our drivers from a CEO perspective are here, then what's the response from our HR community and what solutions are we able to deliver and the value we're able to bring from a human capital perspective. So to start this off, and let's see if we can get the technology to work. There we go. On the screen you'll see the findings from the latest IBM CEO study really highlighted 5 important areas. And it's interesting that the first one, and these are not necessarily in order, but the first issue for CEOs right now and for organizations is this concept of being hungry for change. Everybody in the room, I guess, is being affected by change in some way. CEOs are reporting back to us and saying our organization must change, whether it's our business model, whether it's our products and services, whether it's the way we do business, whether it's about our people. There is an appetite for change. I guess we've all heard innovation and creativity over the last day and a half. But at an organizational level, it's innovation now beyond what our customers might imagine. So it's taking a forward leap in ways that we are not going to have just business as usual or organic growth. It's innovation beyond customer imagination. The third one for us was very, very interesting. And I guess the key part of my presentation will focus on this third area of becoming a more globally integrated organization. Now, having worked in Asia for the last 8 years, when I first moved to Singapore 2001, it was very interesting to see what globalization meant in 2001. And typically, it meant a lot of our Western colleagues flying into Asia and not imposing, but suggesting this was the way things were done in the world. And I think there's been great learning over the last 5, 6, 10 years around what a globally integrated organization looks like. I've got some material on that. We'll spend some time going through it. Disruptive by nature is more about, as we've seen in the last 2 months, who would have predicted the disruption that we've had in our economy and the way we do business. I saw a lovely chart just yesterday that looked at the net worth of the 20 top banks in the world. And this was from a year ago. And if you looked at the circles that they used to be, here's net worth, there is a tiny circle in the middle of that now that says in 12 months, value of organizations has just been eroded dramatically. So disruptive by nature are the conditions that we're working in and operating in. And the other piece around the thing being about being genuine and not just generous is this whole area, and we're seeing more and more of it happening with the green agenda, with the corporate social responsibility agenda, which says it isn't okay just to pay money to fix problems. It's now about being genuine in the activities that we get involved in on a day-to-day basis with everyone in our organization and taking that responsibility to the next level. So we could spend most of the afternoon dealing with all of those 5. I really want to drill into the middle one, which is around being a globally integrated enterprise. Now, we won't spend too much time on charts, but this one's interesting because CEOs are telling us, and if the way to interpret the chart is the green bars are the 2008 study, and if you looked at the previous 2 in blue, they are the previous 4 years. And the key message from the chart is that people skills, from the latest study that we've just done with CEOs, people skills are just as important as market factors in the minds of CEOs. So, does that present an opportunity to us? I think it does. But the challenge we've got is, do we know where those skills are? Have we got an inventory of those skills? And more importantly, do we know what skills we're going to need in the future? Unfortunately, when we took findings from the human capital study that we did, only 14% of those organizations that we studied felt that they were capable of changing quickly enough to meet the demands and needs of their CEO. But if we drilled into that a little further, what we found were the outperforming companies did three things very differently from those that weren't as able to change. The first one was they were able to predict the future skills that the organization would require. Now, as organizations, we all have great visions and great strategies, but do we have people strategies aligned to that? So it's not about the skills inventory that we have today. It's more about, in 12 months' time, will we have the capability and the capacity that we need to be successful against our competitors? So outperformers can identify and predict future skills. They are very effective in locating experts. And for those of you that were in the session this morning around collaboration and innovation and the ability to identify experts in your organization quickly so that they can help bring solution or resolution to problems or to be helpful in innovating new products or services is an absolute key. And the thing around being very effective in collaborating. I won't go into the study any more than that. One of the things we found around collaboration in organizations there is no barrier to collaboration through the use of technology. Collaboration occurs in organizations despite technology. Outperforming organizations seem to have cracked the code around collaboration. I'll spend a little more time with that. I have the great pleasure of working for a company that has a chairman and CEO who said, I can't manage this company by traditional means. If you think of a workforce of 385,000 people, Sam Parmesan took the opportunity to say, there's only one way I can possibly manage what is a global operation, and that is he manages it by its values. Now, pretty hard for an organization of this size and this age for its CEO to take his hands off and say, I must trust and respect my people to do what's right in times of great opportunity and in times of need. But one of the things that Sam has done, and this is an excerpt of his thinking, and I guess one of the values that we hold and the tagline that IBM has about being the innovator's innovator. And that is the emergence of the globally integrated enterprise over the last few years and what we see into the future is not an American or US-centric statement. And for the amount of time that I've been in Asia, what we've seen is the emergence of truly global Korean companies, truly global Chinese companies. We've got wonderful Korean companies operating all around the world with extremely well-known brand names. His point was, to become truly globally integrated, we need to think about doing things differently. And one of the great challenges that the IBM company has faced over the last 15 years as a part of that transformation is how do you transform from being a technology company to a services company? And then how do you, with your common processes, common policies, how do you make sure that the experience is the same for all of your people? And how do you make sure your leadership is also working with the same messages right around the world? A quote on the chart from our colleague at Manpower. It's all about talent. And it's an interesting, I have the quote there simply because it really gives us a view about in our future, talent, you will not be able to reach out and touch talent. We need to find different ways to connect, better ways to connect our talent around our world. Some things on the chart that we would say kind of describes what a globally integrated enterprise looks like. Secures unique value via specialization, taps into a number of modular services, operates with global values, operates seamlessly across the world, embraces collaboration, leverages assets, and makes informed choices about the global competitive marketplace. Things that would say, if that's where we're going as an organization, the linkage to where we are as HR and how HR can make a difference and play into this is really on the chart. It says, we have a great reputation for the bottom half of that chart. We are the keepers of the faith when it comes to HR processes. We've spent many years working on better, effective, efficient process design around the HR processes that are critical to keep an organization working. Our challenge is in the top half of the chart. There was a great book written in 1992 called The War for Talent, and I'm sure most of us have read The War for Talent. If I thought about the future of HR and the role that it must play in the globally integrated enterprise, it is clearly on both sides of this equation. So if we look more specifically at where things potentially are changing, the globally integrated enterprise has issues around HR policies that potentially need to change, because policies geared to one global standard simply may not be aligned with local requirements. The integration and use of data and information is going to become increasingly important. And I think we've seen in the last 3 years, the problem, the challenges that many organizations have actually accessing how many people do I have? Where are they located? Any of you that have worked on any form of shared service exercise for your organization, you can probably tell me that the last organization, or the organization I'm working with at the moment, we're able to count 87 spreadsheets that are regularly used in their organization to capture employee data. So to get to one source of the truth about skills, etc., long way to go. The increasing use of global resourcing. In the last 3 years, IBM has employed some 75,000 people in India alone to utilize as a resourcing base for many of the clients that we work with around our world. Knowledge sharing is going to become more important, and clearly markets like India, markets like China, with a hyper-growth strategy, the likes that we would not have imagined 5 years ago, actually require a different approach from an HR perspective in order to be successful and make those markets work. So there's 3 real things for success that we would suggest: a cost-effective HR service delivery model, a set of integrated talent management capabilities, and interestingly, a different way of leading and managing the organization. That's slide 10 of 72, so we'll have to get going. I'm going to build through this fairly quickly. It's a busy chart. Many of you would recognize this. If I could just talk to a couple of the pieces. In a globally integrated world, there is no doubt that technology does play a large part in being able to reach, access, and integrate and collaborate with your customers. And you'll see customers for HR is also an emerging paradigm on the left-hand side of the chart, because it is employees, it is leaders, but increasingly as talent becomes a challenge for us, we're seeing the emergence of alumni networks, managing as people leave our organisation, managing where they go, so potentially they may be able to come back, join us again in the future. And increasingly, we're looking at partnerships where we need to give those partners access to our organisation as well. However you would look at centres of expertise or different lines of business and business unit partners, I know many of you will have already walked down that path. The layer in the middle is all about enablement. For those of you that have invested heavily in enterprise platforms of technology in whatever way, and those of you that have done that with IBM, I must say thank you very much. The challenge we've got with technology is technology does nothing for the value of the organisation. Technology is not the answer. Technology is the enabler of value, and how you use that technology will dictate to the degree to whether or not we're successful in aligning our talent practices to our overall organisational goals. I promised you a quick example of what we do in IBM from an HR perspective and how that works from helping our global enterprise and the way we operate. I think this is it's an interesting one because it starts to show you where we now have employee service centres and our use of the web in how we would deliver HR services around our world. Let me share with you some statistics. Now, this is interesting simply because look where we started. So for those of you embarking on the journey today, ours started some time ago. For those of you that were in a session this morning and you've read the books, we had a near-death experience as IBM in the mid-90s. And the organisation today is very different from what it was then. But if we looked at what we've done and the HR organisation has done over the last 15 years, some statistics that might be of interest to you. In the early 90s, we had 150 HR delivery centres around our world. Today, we have 8. The percentage of delivery from those service centres clearly in the early 90s wasn't much. Today, we deliver payroll, benefits administration, expense and accounting administration, and a number of our HR processes from those 8 delivery centres around the world. We've reduced our HR applications from over 1,600 to 460. Our headcount has reduced by half. The number of people involved in HRIT down to 250. But the interesting one for me is the effectiveness now we have of retained HR folk from an employee ratio perspective, now sitting at around 335. So real results from a company that is now 65% of its revenues come from outside of the US, where we don't work to a command and control structure, we're driven by values, but it does require leadership with a different set of competencies than what we might have had just 10 years ago. There are core capabilities around what we would call our integrated talent management that helps us to improve the productivity of a global workforce. These things, these examples have come from a secondary study that we did, and really it talks to the 7 key areas. I'm going to flash through them very quickly because, as I say, we're out of time, but there's a common theme in here. And if I took you to the top right, we talked about predicting future supply and demand, but the use of social networks, enabling individuals to perform regardless of where they are, collaborating across our boundaries, driving skills, evaluating performance feedback and understanding demographics, all are critical around integrating our talent management processes in a globally integrated enterprise. I'll flash through these. So understanding demand and supply and where labour will be required is going to be a critical enabler for the global organisation. Do I build? Do I buy? Do I partner in some way to get the skills that I need? The piece of thought leadership that we're just in the process of bringing out right now, and let's make no mistakes about it, the crisis that we face, and this is I guess my biggest fear for us all, if we've learned nothing from previous recessions, is we have a wonderful opportunity to cripple the performance of our organisation tomorrow if we make mistakes today about how we respond to the current financial crisis from a talent perspective. Now, I think you probably know what I'm talking about. We have a wonderful history of making instant competitors from people that we release from our organizations in times of stress. And this is all about being really careful in the next few months as pressure comes on our organization to respond to a tightening of markets about what skills we're going to need, where those skills are, wherever that be in our world, in our organization. And the decisions that we take around release or keep will affect the performance of our organization in the next 12 months to 2 years. We know talent is scarce. We know it's harder to come by than it ever has been. There's a couple of things on the chart that would suggest there are opportunities for us to consider doing things differently and making some changes to the way we would normally respond in order to future-proof our organisation from a talent perspective. Many of you have spent time in a variety of collaboration and social networking sessions over the last couple of days, but clearly knowledge is key. Where that knowledge resides and how that knowledge is shared is also critical to the performance of the organisation. Our enabling technologies are ways that we can utilise that knowledge, get access to that knowledge, and use it for our benefit. Understanding of those networks for a global enterprise is critical. So across the areas where we see the function, the geography, the hierarchy, the tenure and the history of the organisation, understanding those linkages, understanding the blockages, and helping those skills come to the fore as they're required in an organisation. Scott Smith, a colleague of mine who leads our global collaboration practice, used a similar slide in this morning's session. This is an example of what we are fortunate to have in IBM. And as a leader of a practice where I have the opportunity to work with clients, we frequently get challenged with who in our world has the knowledge, has the experience, has done work like this that could solve some of our clients' problems. This is an example of how we might locate expertise across our organisation. It's very hard to read from the back. We call this small blue to help us collaborate around a big blue. But what it does is show the people that we have in our organisation that are associated with a particular topic. It allows us almost instant access to people within the IBM organisation that have knowledge, expertise, and the skills that we can bring to bear to help solve our clients' problems and some of our own internal challenges and problems. The issue of mobile work is becoming increasingly apparent. I won't spend any time on this slide, save to say 45% of the IBM company do not work in an office in our world. They do not go to a place of work that we would consider traditional. 45% of our people work with our clients, they work on client site, or they work from home. Now, if you can imagine in a distributed world where you are running a company by its values and you've got a culture in your organization that used to be I need to check in each day and I need to punch the clock, there is a very big difference in terms of the way we work and the way we're going to need to work in a global environment in the future. Where, I was discussing with a colleague over lunch, in Asia, we do our day jobs from 6 till 9 at night. But then our other job starts when the US comes online and we continue to work. We work in different ways from different places, and that requires leadership and ways of working that are different from what we just do today. Many of you have worked with self-service technologies, whether that's employee or manager self-service. The key, and I can't underestimate the opportunity, is to put information and access to that information in the hands of the people that need it the most quickly. That is your employees and your managers. The role of HR in this is to give access and power so that those folk can update their information as required. We don't need to do that. But to give them the access to the information they need to be more effective in their jobs. There has been, and it was interesting for those of you that saw Jack Welch's presentation, and by video, he talked about communities of practice. And the whole issue of this is no longer top-down. For a global organization to operate to somewhere near its optimum, it needs folk that automatically gather together. We see this already, and there's an interesting paradigm in our markets today. Employees no longer need organizations. Let me go through that one more time. Employees, us, no longer require an organization with which to do work. We already have communities of like-minded individuals that are coming together to do work with like-minded people. The construct of an organization is almost becoming a last century sort of thinking. Now clearly, that's not going to happen overnight. But you look at particularly knowledge workers, professional workers, where you have communities of practice, like-minded people automatically are drawn to each other, and from that comes goodness. Because we see those folk being more innovative, but even within our organizations, coming together where it doesn't require a manager or a leader, it's a self-forming group for the betterment of the organization. I'm sure many of you, let me see if you're still awake. Quick question and then I'll stop, I promise. How many of us have a blog, a personal blog? A personal blog. There you go. Excellent. So, guess what? 5 years ago, we didn't know what a blog was. Today, we have a blog. We're sharing knowledge. We're sharing information. We're sharing our point of view already in these communities. And as many of us have become familiar with the social networking tools, the Web 2.0 tools that are available, more and more of that helps to drive a global integrated enterprise as we move into this new age. I'm going to only focus on this one and then I'll finish. The biggest challenge that we face in Asia right now, if it isn't talent, it's leadership. And if many of us have heard of the phrase transformational leadership, as organizations are moving to become more globally integrated, or even just to survive, what we used to do in the past in terms of what we would call leadership is no longer enough. The emergence of China particularly has created a huge stress on the leadership pool that we have in all of Asia, and indeed our world. Living in Singapore, I've seen not an exodus, but a steady stream of senior professionals and leaders being attracted to China to try and drive or help drive some of that growth. The McKinsey study that's on the chart, for me, really summed it up. And I don't think there's an immediate answer to it. Because we are in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of leaders short of where we need to be to sustain the growth, let alone of China, let alone other countries around our region. So leaders and the development of leaders is critical for us to develop. We could spend more time on this, but Professor, I think I'm out of time. So I will, with due deference, finish, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Wayne Pitt. Thank you. 웨인 핏 부사장께서는 우리 스트래티직 휴먼 리소스 매니지먼트가 매우 중요하다. 기업이 요즘과 같이 이렇게 불안한 또 급변하는 환경하에 있어서는 매우 중요하다. 이런 얘기를 말씀을 쭉 기본 기조로 하셨습니다. 특별히 저에게 또 눈에 띄는 부분은 우리가 세계 맵을 가지고 공장이 어디 있고 우리 사무소가 어디 있는지는 표시를 해도 우리 이 탤런트 쪽 휴먼 리소스 우리가 가용할 수 있는 또 우리가 필요로 하는 그러한 인재풀들이 세계에 어떻게 배치되어 있느냐 하는 그런 맵을 갖는 것이 앞으로 중요하다. 그것이 공장 표시보다 더 중요하다. 이런 말씀을 해주셨습니다. 그건 굉장히 의미가 있고요. 또 기업의 내부뿐만 아니라 기업의 외부에 리더십에 관련된 이 풀을 관리하고 세계적인 그 글로벌 베이시스로 리더 풀을 관리하는 것이 앞으로의 그 변화라든가 이노베이션이라든가 여러 가지 키워드를 우리가 실천하는 데 있어서 굉장히 중요한 요소다라고 하는 말씀을 해주셨습니다. 이어서 웨인 핏 부사장님이 그 발표하신 내용을 기본으로 해서 브렌다 머피 부사장께서 토론을 15분간 먼저 해주시겠습니다.
Thank you very much. I think that works better if it's a little bit closer. Thank you for the opportunity to come here today. I too, as a participant over the last day and a half, have learned a lot from the colleagues. Before I actually jump into some comments from my experience, I wanted to thank the translators in the back because I couldn't have managed through this last day and a half. And I apologize in advance because sometimes I go quickly, so I'll try to be more careful. So my mother and grandmother said to me, when you get to be at a certain age, you actually have developed wisdom. And I think I've reached that point, at least in the chronological number of years I've been on the planet, but I've really determined it's not wisdom so much as it is experience. So what I wanted to share with you is a few observations about things that I've just gone through. 20 years ago, I sat in my first conferences very much like this, and I was just amazed by how much people were doing, by what other companies had on their plate. And I didn't know where to start. So some of my comments here today, and I think I'm joined by my colleagues, will be about where can you start. The exact tie-in that I want to start with is, let's not forget that we, everybody sitting here in the room, we actually are the talent of our companies. In fact, we should be leaders beyond leaders in our companies. And if your company does not expect that of you today, do it for just being part of this profession. So we are the leaders of our companies, whether they're asking us to be or not. We will also make sure that we bring our companies into a very new place. So with that, let me give you a little bit more of the credential that I might bring to the table. 21 years with MetLife. Now, MetLife is #1 insurance company of life insurance in the US and the Americas. We do operate here, and I'd love it if you tell me that you know MetLife Korea. We have an agency force here, and hopefully we provide some benefits to some of your companies as well. MetLife is 140 years old. It's a very large and complicated company. And when people tell me that their local culture, their local company can't go through change, I think back to when I first started with the company. And I'm not sure if you were with IBM at the time or another large company. Let's see if this sounds familiar to anyone. You could never correct an officer in a meeting. In fact, you probably had to sit not at the main table, you sit kind of at a secondary table. Decisions were not always made in the room. They were made over lunch or over coffee or over drinks later. To the women in the room, I have to admit they were often made by the men of our organizations. So now we fast forward, and MetLife wants to become a public company around the year 1999, and we actually went public in early 2000, 2001. We had to change the exact culture of our company that had made us the great company that we were, and we had to change it in the course of about 18 months. We did in fact change to be a publicly traded company. We created a performance culture that I would put side by side with any major company in the world. In doing this, HR became the actual best partner of every single business. We now have an experience, mostly in our US operations, and we're bringing it overseas here, that our business partners actually ask us to be the first people at the table with them. And that's a little bit different from where I sat 20 years ago when I started with the company, and where some of you might be sitting as you're sitting here today. So, where do you get started? And I would say this, make it personal. Make this be your own personal quest to be part of a company that you want to be part of, that you want to help change the way the company operates, because you wouldn't be here if you didn't feel that way. You wouldn't be here trying to get additional information and surround yourself with people who have gone through this change if in your soul you didn't feel that's what you wanted to do. So live with that, make that part of what you do, and let it guide you every day. Second, don't copy. Don't copy anything that anybody here has said. Take pieces of it. Sometimes take large pieces of it. Make sure you talk to people about why they did certain things. But nothing that's being offered here today can you pick up the presentation and take it home and make it work for you. But take it as a resource, add it to the resources of the peers you have in your company, the thought leaders of your companies, and other HR professionals that you interact with. So take it all. Don't feel the obligation that you have to copy it. And I think oftentimes we do. I also am saying, oh, I want to make sure I get that presentation. I want to make sure I have that available to me. But remember, it's to take pieces of what you have. I would also say, in my love of MetLife, I would also say we're not exactly perfect. We are not yet a global company. So we are a very, very fine international company. And one of the objectives that I have is to actually help the organization become global and to bring that across here to the Asia Pacific region. So in doing that, I would say start to know what your challenges are. So really, if we were a business team, we would be doing a SWOT analysis, right? So we would be looking and saying, what are our strengths and our weaknesses and what are our opportunities? But look at your challenges. For MetLife, I run a region where we have no integrated IT system. We have no global platforms in our HR environment. We have programs, so we do our talent management, for example, but we don't have integrated global IT systems. Our business groups are not integrated. So many of the folks we've heard over the last day and a half have integrated business groups. So they run a global institutional business or a global product business. We run US domestic agency, for example, as a distribution line. I would also say that they think they're the only distribution line. But we then also have an international business, and we run that on a country basis. So we don't have a complete company running as a global firm. Although I will add that that's one of our chairman's top objectives during his tenure. I would say to you then, don't be defeated. Everybody has barriers, and one of the greatest things is to learn what those are and start to face them, and then start to derive the solutions that might go along with those. And so this is where the power of what our personal contribution can be, because we're here to create solutions. So in that case, start thinking of what your advantages are. The advantages that I see in our firm is that we have a core value system that translates to any culture. It's about who we are as a company. We believe in relationships. We believe in people count. And in the financial services industry, people really are the assets for us. We have a very, very dedicated team. We all really want to be part of the company, and we really want to be reaching the objectives that are set for us. You know what? Not every HR team in my portfolio of countries is yet a strategic partner, but we're on that path. So celebrate along the way what you can accomplish. So when one of my HR leaders prioritizes the list of what they do every day, this was one of the first things I asked them to do when we got here, is to say, write down everything that you and your teams do in a given day. Then decide what's adding no value. It doesn't make you not important. You're going to have to make room in your day to start doing more strategic things. We've started to make that transition. We've gotten our country managers to appreciate the value of HR, not because they're sending out the holiday party invitation. We've dropped that as one of the things HR was doing. But because when it came time for them to do their talent reviews this year, we brought in a list of suggestions and said, have you thought about this change, or did you ever know that the person who's running your customer service group used to have a direct marketing background? And we brought that to the table. They forgot already that we're not sending out the invitations for the holiday party anymore. So that exchange, so little things along the way will help to build the credibility. I can already tell I'm probably going too fast. I can hear them all in the background translating. The other thing about the credibility of HR, and I'm proud, selfishly proud to say this, in our countries traditionally, the CFO was the right hand of the country manager. So as we've asked our country managers to broaden their perspective as leaders of the company, we've asked them to include other members of their leadership team as key thought partners. And I'm actually very proud to say that in 3 of our 7 operations here in this region, their HR director is now their confidant. And it doesn't mean that I don't like our CFOs. In fact, I like them a lot. And they certainly have a role to be part of the thought process of the organization. But think of this, just because they started doing things that were meaningful to the business, they got invited to more places and are now actually the confidants of many of our country managers. So that's how sometimes you can measure. I know we've learned a lot over these last couple of days about metrics and measures and numbers and percentages. I'll tell you that I'm very happy when a country manager says to me, let me go talk to my HR director and I'll get back to you. So it may be an intrinsic value, but it is something that, that we use to measure. And it makes me very proud of what our team is doing. So starting out small. Even if your company hasn't yet set its full global perspective, or its full integrated plan, or some of the models and wonderful slides that we've seen here in the last couple of days are not yet part of what your company is thinking. Again, don't be discouraged, because what you can do is actually start to move quickly in the things that you can do. So if, for example, you're going to a new payroll system, don't sign a 5 or 10 year agreement. If you know something might be coming from your company, make it something that you can be very, very flexible about. One of the things that I was just going to mention very quickly, and they passed me a note that I'm virtually out of time, so I'm going to choose between 2 other pieces of wisdom that I now call them, and I'm going to share with you. One of the things that we found is that if you prepare your HR teams to be the very best, make them better than any other team in the organization, you will find opportunities to be able to service your businesses that were never ever possible. We put an org development and organizational effectiveness specialist in one of our groups. We didn't call his position that because we were afraid everyone's going to say, not all the charts, not all the models. We made him a generalist. And then when we had an opportunity to have Harvard business professors come and do a strategy meeting, we immediately went in with an organizational capability assessment, which we didn't call that. We actually just said that we would help them figure this out. We now have our OE specialist on the road with each one of our companies, and they're asking for more. So don't feel badly if the whole big project and plan doesn't seem like it's going to work. Take little pieces, be a leader beyond being a leader of where your group actually is, so that folks will come to rely on you. And my last comment was one that we just have a new regional executive who has 25 years with the company, and he's come from the U.S., and he met with all of the business teams at the beginning of this week. And I'm just going to read from the notes I took at the time. He said this to all of us, but he especially pointed out to HR about us making sure everybody else does this as well. So this is the owners of the corporate culture idea. And that is that he feels that the value to being part of a company and feeling good about the company that you're going to work with is that you feel connected and you feel satisfied. Again, he looked at the table and said, Brenda, you'll help people feel that, right? Then you're going to have self-starters around you, that we want thinkers around us, that there's substance over style, and that hierarchy is not the most important way for us to manage our business. And above all, we must always respect each other. And again, when I go back all the way to full circle and say, every day we can be leader beyond leader of our own company, and it's really about being satisfied, about keeping people connected, very, very unique to the HR environment, and making sure that everybody's very, very respected. So I promised I would speak very quickly, and I apologize about that. And I would like to then pass the remaining time on over.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Pretty impressive anecdotes and your stories. If I can go back pretty quickly on myself, because Brenda already covered what she has done in MetLife for the 20 plus years. I was actually in business since late part of 1970s when the construction boom started. I graduated from the Korean University and here in Korea and joined a small and medium Korean company, which has a venture in the Middle East 5 years. Of course, was not easy, but for me, 5 years after the small and medium Korean company has venture in Middle East, I jumped in another big conglomerate company called Daewoo, worked 5 years. So 10 years Korean background before I joined multinational corporation. It's called AT&T. That was just after 88 Summer Olympic Games. And I was one of the best players in AT&T, kind of sales champion, decorate lots of corporate parties, things like that. And all of a sudden, I was headhunted by AT&T's competitors and then become country manager in the year 1994. I think that's the first starting point of my discussion for managerial concept, how talent mapping or how talent management. I think today's topic is, simply speaking, talent and leadership in global context. That's what I understand. And probably after having five years successful career in AT&T, I was really able to be, the headhunted and also running a country as a country manager of telecommunication concerns. And then about 6.5 years, I built a company locally and also regionally and part of the Global Alliance of Federation. That was enormous experience and enormous kind of challenges and learning as well. So I was able to attend several executive MBAs like INSEAD or the Yonsei MBA, things like that. But what I want to emphasize is having that kind of career, I was also again to face lots of M&As, merger and acquisition, change of ownerships, things like that, all kinds of tsunami, so to speak. You know, 1997 and 8, there was a financial crisis. The parent company was selling the company. And then I looked clearly, what be my future? Where be my future going, heading? And pretty interestingly, I never ever dreamed in the year 2000, after a couple of years after the financial crisis, I am planning my new career. That's a big challenge, but thank God I was able, again, headhunted by another headhunter to become a headhunter. You know what I mean? So that is starting of my career in the year 2000. Since that, I really tried to understand what's going on around the world, what's going on around Korea. And I was always lamenting the lack of Korean mindset, mentality from the global context at that time, because I was promoting my secretary as a senior account manager, sent her to Hong Kong for the second month, couple of years. She became the best performer in the region, anyway, I don't want to waste your time. To make a long story really short, there are pretty interesting concepts like back to the basic. People are people. So for adding some value in my concept of back to the basic, people are people, you have to understand the whole HR process, not just simple, the acquisition of a talent or retention of a talent or growing of a talent. That's whole over a life cycle. I would call that 3 A's. If you understand what 3 A's, you probably better positioned understanding whole HR. Number 1, acquisition of talents. Number 2, assessment of talents. Some people can say dashboard, the performance, etc. But without a measurement, there is no management. That's what Peter Drucker mentioned. As everybody knows, we are in the knowledge economy. And corporate value does not come from anything like the plant, equipment, the land. That just come from something back or inside your brain. So it's actually how you assess. Usually the most important thing for me, because I also happen to get all the benefit of getting development and training from my employers, which is exec coaching, is third thing, amplification of the talent you acquire. So that's back to the basic 3A. How you acquire your talent, where, why, and by whom, how. I think that's something already Wayne mentioned, like a mapping of talents. So in the map, you put your pins, but for me, we'd rather be practical. In that case, we have to look around who are the best experts who can help you to map those talents. There are several examples, but I will skip. So after having that 3 clear A's in your mind, I'll move on to the leadership domain, which already Jack Welch mentioned yesterday. He mentioned 4 E's plus 1 P, but for me, I can simplify the 3 E's. You are all leaders, I assume, and if not, I think always we are trying to be a leaders. For what is required for the leaders? Simply speaking, 3E, number 1, the capability for envisioning for the future, the uncertainties. Number 2 is engagement, how you engage people to your vision, where you want to go, how you just need to engage your people, otherwise people will just sit back. Okay, that's not invented by me, but you have to engage people. Number 3, of course, like Jack Welch, execution. So 3E again is a key concept I learned for the past 30 years of experience. And in this 3E, you have to think about where you can get those, the leadership talents again. When I'm mentioning about 3A, 3E, I also attempt to talk about something associated, 3 C's, maybe too much acronym, but what I want to emphasize, as a leader, you should be, you must be capable of implementing 3 C's in your organization or any group of, the people you are working together. Number 1, the clarity. Where we are going. The clarity, I think, is something we somehow lacks, because we are even quite sure where I'm going. Where's my career 5 years, 10 years from now on? The clarity means actually associated with the envisioning where I'm going. Do we have clear purpose of our career? Do we have a clear purpose of the mission of an organization, not just corporate level, but the management team level? Number 1 is clarity. Number 2, climate. What does the climate means, I think, is simply speaking, system and procedures, or the support. The organizational HR procedure, of course, there are lots of procedures, systems for support, IT, infrastructures. So as a leader, you have to build that kind of climate. Some people can say it's a corporate culture as well. Usually, the last part of 3C is competence. I can go all the day for the competence, but simply speaking, competence can be summarized 1 SK, which means skill and knowledge, plus BA, meaning behavior and attitude. The attitude actually is a real asset which people usually neglect or forget. Somehow there are some pretty interesting the punning joke. It is not attitude, but attitude that determines your altitude. So when you are dealing with any people, Even though you admit the people has great PhD, great background, experience, expertise, if the people behave pretty strangely and their attitude is not something you are looking, you do not think that people as a leader. So there are so many things I want to add, but simply speaking, we go back to the basic, 3 A's, how, where, why you're acquiring talents for growth of business, and how you assess those talents. And then how you amplify those talents, which is actually a good way to attract talents or acquire talents. And then you always have to think about what the 3 E's as a leader I'm implementing. Like, do I have a clear or vision or envisioning capability? Or can I engage people with me to work well or work together in hardship like a financial crisis? And do I have execution? Jack Welch yesterday mentioned kind of 20, 70, 10, the bottom 10, how we just deal with those bottom 10. And also, as a leader, if we think it pretty clearly, clarity, climate, competence. So we cannot change people, but as a leader, as of now, or even future leaders, I definitely believe by being flexible, open to learning, everybody is ready to add value in any organization for the growth, prosperity, and this is definitely knowledge-intensive economy. You know, Korea only have a human capital, and I think we need to think it in different angles by learning the examples from IBM, MetLife, all that kind of examples. Thank you.
네, 박수로서 브렌다 머피 부사장께서는 그 향후 노동력의 그 이동 추이에 대해서 말씀해 주시고 또한 뭐 홍콩, 인도, 중국을 비롯한 각국의 브라질 등 각국의 그 노동력의 특성에 대해서 또 말씀해 주셨습니다. 또 최정수 대표께서는 여러분께 아주 그 귀에 쏙쏙 들어오게 3A, 3E, 3C와 같은 그런 이 터미놀로지를 이용을 해서 어떻게 그 인력 관리를 해야 되고 또 자기의 능력을 개발해야 되고 조직이 갖고 있는 그 리소시스를 잘 활용해야 되는가에 대한 기본 개념에 대해서 말씀해 주셨습니다. 제가 그 처음에 시작할 때 말씀드렸듯이 이제 앞으로 한 10분 내지 한 15분가량은 우리 플로어에서 지금 우리 그 웨인 피트 부사장께서 발표하시고 또 두 분이 또 토론해 주신 내용에 대해서 또 여러분들이 앞으로의 이 글로벌 경영과 또 이 노동의 그 이동 또 이 인력 관리의 그 세계적인 그 인력 관리 통합에 대한 그 관련해서 여러분 활발한 질문을 해주시고 토론을 해주시기 부탁드리겠습니다. 먼저 질문하실 분 손을 좀 들어주시기 바랍니다. 예, 토론을 그 준비하는 과정에 있어서 제가 좀 우리 그 웨인 피트 부사장님께 먼저 질문을 좀 드렸으면 좋겠습니다. 사실 그 기업들이 글로벌라이즈도 되고 또한 기업이 갖고 있는 그 중요한 재산이 세계에 있는 그 가용한 그 인력이고 그 인력을 잘 관리하는 거라고 생각이 됩니다. 그런데 그 각국에 있는 인력들이라고 하는 것은 사실 그 문화의 영향을 받습니다. 그래서 글로벌라이즈 된 회사라고 하더라도 인력을 통합적으로 활용하는 데 있어서 각 개개인들이 갖고 있는 그 문화적 백그라운드의 차이 때문에 이러한 인력 관리를 하는 데 있어서 상당히 어려움이 있을 수도 있으리라고 생각됩니다. 그래서 되는 기업, 글로벌라이즈 된 펌에서는 어떠한 식으로 각 문화적 차이가 있는 인력들을 하나의 그 어떤 그 HR 그 팔러시 안에서 관리하실 수 있는지 좀 경험을 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
It's a very good question. I think from our experience, there's probably a couple of distinct philosophies that we need to understand about where responsibility for leadership lies, particularly from a human resource perspective. I think many organizations today are moving strongly to the place where leaders and managers are responsible for the human resources in an organization, not HR. As organizations have globalized also, one of the trends that we have seen is the emergence of the local leader, the local manager. So clearly, over the last 10 years, I expected to see expatriate leaders on decreasing. And it's interesting today, if you look, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. But I think that's for the primary reason that there are more organizations that are globalizing, and hence we're seeing more Westerners in Asia, we're seeing more third country nationals around Asia as well. But if you work on the basis that the ownership of human resources rests with the manager, then I think it goes far more easily to culture that says, as long as leaders are working to a similar set of competencies and of values wherever they are in the world, so that guides how people behave as leaders and the importance of those skills and competencies in managing people, then the global organization has a greater opportunity or a greater chance of success using local leaders working with agreed global values and behaviors, and the experience that binds an employee to the organization fundamentally is between their supervisor and themselves. If that experience is consistent with the values of the organization and it's demonstrated by competent leadership, then it allows and flexes for the culture that occurs in each of those countries.
네, 아주 앞으로는 우리가 글로벌 폼에 있어서의 리더들이 이제 인터내셔널 리더라고 따로 있는 것이 아니라 로컬에서 그러한 리더들이 앞으로는 더 발전돼서 나올 것이고, 그러한 리더들이 각 지역에서 성공하면 그러한 성공이 글로벌 리더로서 또 발전할 수 있는 그러한 기회가 될 것이다라고 이렇게 말씀해 주셨습니다. 사실 글로벌라이즈 되면서도 또한 그것이 또 로컬라이제이션하고도 같이 가는 그러한 것이 또 하나의 추세다는 말씀을 해주셨습니다. 우리 플로어에서도 질문해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다. 예, 저 뒤에 계시는데요. 저 무선 마이크. 네.
First of all, thank you very much for the session today. I found this session very informative and useful. Still like to thank you for all speakers today. I'm very glad that I'm here today and have an opportunity to ask a question. My question for Mr. Pete and Ms. Murphy is your role as people, chief people officer for the Asia Pacific region, which I'm not even sure the exact number of how many countries we have here and how many languages we are spoken here in the region. If you can, would you please share with us your personal philosophy that how to retain the extraordinary core talent, especially for the developing country that is speed of light, fast-growing countries like China and India. So that is my question.
I guess I'm nominated to respond first. Since it's a personal view, I'm very happy to do this. I would also say it's our corporate view. It's not about money. It's not about stay bonuses. It's not about making it perks and things like that. It's the experience the person has in our environment. It's about an open dialogue with their manager where the individual participates in their own career. Their career is not defined for them. It's something that they help to manage. And so it's something about participating in your own existence with our company, being given projects and challenges, and being recognized. There are lots of pieces of literature about the 1001 ways to recognize people, but it's really about making sure that their colleagues know and that other people in the corporation know. So we have found that it's not about money. Somebody else can match that, right? I've done it myself. I'm recruiting someone. It says they have an X amount of retention bonus, and I can match that. But it's for our special talent that we really want to create an environment where they know their contribution is valued.
I think it's a great question, and a lot of us are spending time on what's the top 10%, what's the top 15%. I've got perhaps a more pragmatic view of how to retain really high-flying talent. And it's three simple things. One is fast track the kids. Fast track the kids, remove the clutter, and start practicing one-on-one HR. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. Fast track the kids is all about the generations of folk that we have in our organizations. We are a multi-generational company. Doesn't matter which company we are. And too often, for our high flyers and our high potentials, we make them a promise. And you could even call it, an employee value proposition. It says, join us, join MetLife, join IBM, join MRI, and this is the promise that we give you about career advancement, how you might grow your skills, etc. Too often, we fail to deliver on the promise. People get disillusioned and leave us. Too often, we don't consider the aspirations of those individuals that we would consider to be high talent in ways that impact their daily lives in our organization. Fast tracking the kids means for folk of a 20s or 30s generation, match them up tomorrow with people that they can relate to in a supervisory role. So if you've got a 20-something, match them up with a 20-something that's in a supervisory role. They talk a different language. They get it. Sometimes they don't need to talk at all. Most often, they won't even communicate verbally. It'll all be by technology. Match them up in ways that you don't have the disparity of senior leaders in your organization managing the younger folk in the generations across your organization. The second one is, when I say clear the clutter, this is not so much about the best process, the best form, following the process. Clear the clutter out of the way and sit down and have honest discussions, which is Brenda's point, around what do you really want to get out of your experience with our organization. Because the high performers have made a decision, most people have, but particularly the high performers, have made a decision to join your organization. They want something from that experience. Their skills are valuable, they're highly transferable in today's marketplace. So how can you deliver and come to the agreement and arrangement that says, I will commit to this organization, this is what I want, this is where I expect you to keep your part of the bargain, you will get the performance from me. And then the last one, which I mentioned, was one-on-one HR. And this has nothing to do with HR, all right? It's about HR getting out of the way, passing the baton and responsibility for the high-performing talent and the high-potential talent in your organization to the people that are responsible for it on a day-to-day basis. And if you can do that, and the clients that I'm working with right now are now embedding both performance bonuses and performance sanctions into the remuneration of leaders in the organization, should there be achievement, overachievement or underachievement of the talent that they believe critical to the organization. It has nothing to do with HR. It has everything to do with one-on-one HR and the experience that those high potentials have with the organisation.
Though I know the question was not addressed to me, I can add up something on Wayne mentioned. I can give you pretty simple kind of answers for one-on-one. How are we going to maintain your one-on-one? Maybe I'm using too much acronyms. So 4 W's you may think it about, okay? Not 3 W. Number one, you better ask, where are you going 5 years from now, 3 years? Asking the question, where you are going. Number two, why you are going there? Do you want to go to the top of Mountain Everest? Why you are going? You want to have the fame, reputation, money? Number three, where you are now, right now, at this moment. Lastly, what's next? Then what are you going to do? So that's kind of helping people after having one-on-one HR or one-on-one dialogue, self-realization of the missions or roles, so the kind of self-coaching type of thing. You know, I wrote 2 books on that, but anyway, that's pretty simple, 4 W answers.
감사합니다. 충분한지 모르겠지만 그래도 시간 제약 때문에 다음 질문 있으시면 한 분 더 받고 끝내도록 하겠습니다. 질문 아닙니까? 네. 지금 아마 시간이 다 됐기 때문에 질문하시는 것도 아마 지금 자제하시는 것 같습니다. 오늘 특히 이 글로벌라이즈된 환경에서 기업이 갖고 있는 가장 중요한 자산은 사실 뭐 기계 장치도 아니고 테크놀로지도 아니고 그보다 더 중요한 것이 휴먼 리소스다, 핵심 인재다. 이러한 걸 다시 한번 확인하고 이 핵심 인재 관리가 기업의 장기적인 생존, 서스테이너블 글로스에서 굉장히 중요한 요소다는 말씀을 우리가 같이 오늘 시야를 갖고 그 방법론에 대해서도 우리가 같이 나눴습니다. 바쁘신 시간 중에서도 오늘 이렇게 좋은 발표를 해주신 웨인 피트 부사장님, 또한 좋은 토론을 해주신 브렌다 머피 부사장님, 또한 최정수 대표님께 감사드리고 오늘 이 자리에 참석하셔서 또 좋은 질문과 또 경청해 주신 우리 방청객 여러분께도 감사드립니다. 이것으로 오늘 세션을 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.